Here's the most important, like pocket-sized definition to take away from this. This is the thing that we're going to be using the most. I mentioned it earlier. We have finite resources. Our time is finite. Our energy is finite. A couple things that people are not as aware of: our attention is finite. There are so many things happening in any given moment, way more than your brain can fit into awareness. So there is a process that the brain engages in pre-consciously, meaning outside of your awareness, outside of your control, that determines which things come into awareness and which things do not. So as an example, I use the same example every time. Until I say what I'm about to say in 5 seconds, none of you are consciously aware of the feeling of the chair underneath you or the floor underneath you. As soon as I say that, now all of a sudden you're aware of that feeling. Because the brain before was saying, we got all this data coming in, some of it's more useful than others. The feeling of the chair, not useful, let's not be aware of it, throw it away. But as soon as I put those words to it, then the brain says, oh, might be relevant, let's bring it in and make sure that we're aware of it. It's a very important one to know with attention, that attention is finite and that these decisions happen pre-consciously. They have to, because if we were going to consciously choose what to be aware of, we'd have to be aware of it first in order to choose, and we can't do that. Working memory, that awareness space, is also limited. That once something comes in through attention, some stuff goes right back out again pretty quickly. Some stuff we hang on to for a while because we find it relevant to solving some problem that we're working on. And until we solve that problem, we don't want to let it go. Processing is when we then take that information from working memory, compress it in some way, shape, or form, code it, and put it into long-term memory so that we can retrieve it later. And there's various ways that that can happen. We'll get into more of these definitions later. But we have finite resources. Those, time, energy, attention, and working memory, are used in anything that we do, no matter how easy. When I reach down to take a sip of my tea, some time, energy, attention, working memory went to that. Very minimal amount, except that I'm talking about it, so it's more than it would normally be. But it all takes something, unless it's an autonomic process, which means that stuff like heartbeats that the brain takes care of without our conscious input. And those resources are finite. So here's our pocket-sized definition: is executive functioning is about the management of our resources, choosing how to spend our resources, on what things, in what ways, for what reasons, what return we believe we'll get out of them, and then observing what happens. That's what we're talking about. It's not about, if I do something, I think it's because it's important, and if I don't, it's because I think it's not important. It's that we all have way more important and good things that we care about and want to do than we are actually capable of doing with the resources we have. So we have to have a process to filter out which things are the ones we're going to engage in. Does anybody have any questions about executive functioning? I know that you're probably muted right now. You can put things in the chat if anybody does. I just want to be real clear what we mean. So strategies are important, skills are important. It's not that any one thing is more important than the next. It's that we want to have a kind of complex and nuanced understanding of the whole thing. As a general rule of thumb, you'll hear me say this a lot, that our brain is trying to manage resources, right? So we want to spend the minimum amount of resources on a thing. And the minimum amount of resources to spend on a thing is to not be aware of it at all. And then the next past that is to be aware of it as a static, unchangeable thing. It just is this, it always has been and always will be. And then we can get into a binary where it's either this or that, and then a third option, and more and more and more. It's not that more nuance or more complexity is better. It's not. It's about going as complex as you need to in order to accomplish the things that you're trying to accomplish. We want the simplest strategies, the simplest understandings to get by. But if that doesn't work, then we get more into the nuance. So because of the nature of this series and what we're doing here, we will get into nuance and complexity a lot, because people wouldn't be here if the simple understandings were working for them. So we need to go to the next. It doesn't invalidate the simple understandings. Simplicity, simple ways of knowing things can be accurate, can be true, but imprecise. We want to look for more precision.